Hi friends, it's Annie Grace and I am here answering questions. Today's question, and I am the author of This Naked Mind, that's who I am. And today's question is from Scott. And Scott says, "Hi Annie, I remember a time when I didn't think about drinking, I just drank. I remember being just part of it all. And although there were aspects I didn't like being hungover, and I may have been hurting myself, in some ways I just felt so carefree because I wasn't thinking about it, wasn't consuming my life. Now I feel like my life is consumed by quitting, and not just the drinking part, but the part where you get used to life without alcohol. Sometimes it feels harder than it's worth. Sometimes it's all I think about, it's frustrating, and sometimes it feels like alcohol now has more power over me than when I used to drink so much of it. Will I ever break free from the work of it, and is it worth it?" Wow, Scott, that's the crux of the issue, right? That's the question. Is it worth making this change? Change is hard. And I could tell you a million reasons. Yes, 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 a million yeses. Yes, it's worth it. All sorts of reasons why. But actually, I think it's more beneficial today to kind of talk about why it's so hard to change. And I think we often, more in the good old days, we didn't think about every drink or not having every drink. We just did what we wanted to do. And that felt a lot like freedom. And I'll tell you also something, it always happens. It classically happens when you stop drinking for 3 or 4 months. The euphoria of the change, the hope kind of wears off. And a few months into not drinking, all the reasons you quit in the first place become less pronounced in your life. So you're feeling better. You don't really remember what a hangover feels like. Like if you're not physically ill, if you're not puking, it's hard to remember what nausea feels like. And then when you do have the flu, you're like, oh, it's hard to remember what not being nauseous feels like. That same thing happens with hangovers. So you don't really remember the horrors of drinking. You've probably lost some weight, you probably feel really good. And so you see it from the outside and you're looking at it like something everybody does and you're wondering, well, why not? So you look back at stuff through kind of rose-colored glasses. It's like me and stress, right? I get really stressed. My husband says, "Okay, you got to try this meditation. Just meditate 10 minutes a day." I do it 10 minutes a day for 5 days. I feel phenomenal. I'm like, what is this? This is amazing. I feel so good. Then I feel so good that I stop meditating and I go right back to being stressed. So anyway, I think that often when we quit drinking, we forget the reasons we quit drinking in the first place. And then it can feel like work. Like, why are we doing this? We used to just be carefree. So I think that's one important point. So we miss the ignorance, and life is like that in all sorts of areas. We always miss, something. And, you know, there's two important things to remember. First, despite the ignorance of your drinking when you were drinking, drinking was taking its toll. And second, that ignorance is gone. And as much as you miss it, you can't get it back. Like you can't become ignorant again of the fact that alcohol really did take its toll in your life. And you're never going to be able to just pick up a drink without thinking about it again. It's always going to be thoughts. And I know that doesn't sound encouraging, but actually it is. So let me explain what I mean. So imagine that you are asleep in a burning house and the burning is happening. The house is burning down. Even if you're completely unaware of it and completely unconscious and you're in your slumber and you're just dreaming, you're not aware of it, but the house is burning, it's on fire. The damage to your body, to your soul, to your relationships by letting alcohol have the upper hand in your life, that's happening even when you're ignorant of it. And that's really important. And you're not always ignorant of it because especially something happens even when you're sleeping in a burning house, you start to smell the smoke. Some unpleasant things begin to happen to awaken you, and the purpose of the unpleasantness is to awaken you from the disaster that you're finding yourself in. So alcohol is doing bad things to your body, it's doing bad things to your relationships, and it's becoming more than you can control, and you need to be awakened somehow. So this happens, remember the early mornings when you woke up from the night before, you just looked around, felt completely like crap, and everything rushed back in and it just sucked. And those moments when you were really clear on not actually being intoxicated, but actually feeling the pain of intoxication. That's like smelling the smoke. Something happens, and that something is not necessarily painless, but that thing wakes you up. And awakening, it's a process. So it might be a painful process, but at times the process of awakening from kind of an alcohol consuming your life is so painful that we drink more to fall back asleep, to become more ignorant of it. And that can, in fact, perpetuate the process. And sometimes it takes a really long time to wake up because we do this so many times, because we're so unwilling to wake up to this burning house, to what's around us, to the reality of the fact that alcohol is not the friend that we thought it was, that it can take us a really long time to wake up. We could be on the brink of disaster. Escape becomes more difficult. So the good news is that like waking up early, like that's a really good thing. You can arrest addiction when it's still emotional, still psychological. You know, you can arrest it before you have any symptoms just by being really cautious and careful. And waking up in a burning house, as painful as it is a gift. It doesn't feel like it at the time, but waking up saves your life. And that's the truth, but we need to be honest and admit that waking up can be terrifying. Everything we thought was familiar, you know, our habits, our routines, our identity, our way of relaxing, our friends, our social life, everything we thought was familiar is coming into question. We literally have to reorient ourselves in this new life. And, you know, often because drinking can take such a toll on your life, you could be waking up in the middle of an absolute catastrophe. I mean, what could be waking you up could be a DUI or your spouse leaving. And hopefully it's not like that. But I think that we're waking up and we're beginning to try and escape. And we're starting, but in order to escape, to ask questions that we don't know the answers to. And we hate, as human beings, we are afraid of the unknown. It is uncomfortable to us. We have to venture out of what we know, which is drinking, which is a life full of alcohol, into what we don't know, which is a life without alcohol. And when the house burns down, we're forced outside. We're forced outside without the numbing faculties of our coping mechanism. I mean, we're essentially naked and exposed because we don't have anything to pour into our glass to numb us to the reality of life, to take the edge off, and we have to come to terms with life as it is. And I think, you know, sometimes you just have to remember that when you first wake up, you only have one goal: escape, find clean air, and breathe. And sometimes that's all you can do, is just breathe. And remember that waking up, no matter what you're waking up into, the waking up is a gift. It is a gift. And you wouldn't be asking this question about if it was worth it if the journey isn't hard. It can't be hard. And I think that's why I wanted to answer it that way, is the waking up is such a gift. You don't know that you're lost from the path until you are aware that you're lost from the path. I mean, you could be walking far from the path that you're supposed to be on, you know, for a long time before you realize that you've done this turn before. And that awareness, that knowledge of the distance between where your life is and where you want it to be, that spark of awareness is such a gift. And the second question, or the second point I want to make is that, you know, Scott, I'm sorry if I'm a little blunt, but it's so true. We are awake. So the question actually becomes somewhat irrelevant. You can't go back to sleep in a burning house, no matter how hard you try. You have awakened to the things that alcohol does in your life. And even if you go back to drinking tomorrow and say, I'm just going to be a drinker again, I'm just going to go and be a drinker, it's not going to work out like it was before. You can't go back to doing things you know now. You've seen behind the curtain. You know the pain this can cause. Like, you are awake. And that, while it's such a beautiful thing, I understand how it's easy to mourn for the ignorance of being unconscious to this truth. But to answer your specific question, the journey's hard, and it can be hard. And there's lots of ways to make it easier, lots of support things you can do. But yes, a million yeses. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, it's worth it. It's worth it in the truest, realest, most profound way. It's worth it because you get to experience this life with the senses that you were created with, And all of it, everything becomes more real, more tangible when you have more of your senses and more of your consciousness and more of your being to experience it with. And so even if that realness has emotions that you don't always consider to be good emotions, you know, even if it has tears, even if it has rawness, even if it has depression, it's really you. And there is no journey more important kind of in this life than going back and getting to know yourself again, relearning yourself and who you are, and relearning it without the numbing, graying parts of alcohol that just take you further from yourself. So stopping drinking, you know, it's like escaping the fire. And on the other side is rich, true, beautiful life, and it's absolutely worth it. Thank you.